Hey there, Hill folk, and welcome back to another episode, another week of Appalachian Intelligence. We're super thankful that you guys can join us again for another week. Um, we had a great time last week. We had a big episode drop, the UFO and train collision in Eastern Kentucky. That was a lot of fun talking about that and throwing out different theories and ideas on all that. And then we were guest featured on the Hollow Sky podcast with Steve and Kyle, Hollow Cult, all that you that have merged with the Heel Folk now and become the Heel Folk Cult Hollow. I don't know. We're gonna have to think of a name for that. Me and Kyle and Steve have been throwing around Holler Sky. I kind of like that. But no, we appreciate you guys joining us as well. We love those boys over at Hollow Sky, and they've been gracious. They've been extremely kind and supportive of us. I think recently they've pushed our show as much or more than they've pushed their own. So for you guys, for them, we're extremely thankful. Um, with you today, as always, Justin and Lance. Ryan won't be able to make it tonight, so all you Ryan fans out there, I'm really sorry. There's no gummies in this episode. But today, you don't just have to listen to me and Lance because we have a really, really special guest with us. This guy's an author, philosopher, and a seeker of truth. He's an investigator of the esoteric, a harbinger of hidden knowledge, the lead field correspondent for the new hit news station, Dystopia Now. And he's the arch nemesis to the AI overlords. Nick Hinton, everybody. The Nick Hinton. Nick, how are you, brother?
Doing really good, man. I did like that intro a lot. The dystopian now field correspondent. That's hilarious.
Dude, I honestly, no joke, I love Dystopia Now. I love it.
Dude, it's so fun to do. And, you know, me and Maverick, though, we just have such bad scheduling habits. So we haven't worked on it in a while, but we really need to make another episode. We've been trying. We were going to do one for the 23rd, but I was like, man, I don't, everyone thought the world was going to end that day. And I was like, I really, I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, that would have been a good emergency episode. You guys just act like the world is really ending, like a solar flare
Yeah.
just hit,
Hmm.
or a zombie apocalypse was going on.
I think I've gone back and listened to each of those episodes, Nick. I don't know, probably 3 or 4 times each. And
Are
every
you
time,
serious?
yeah, and every time, like I catch something different that I missed one of the time, and it never gets old to hear Maverick just giggle every now and then.
You know what? I think I'm gonna call him after this and tell him we got a schedule. So thanks for the inspiration.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Well, honestly, dude, we talk about it all the time on here and amongst ourselves. I mean, it's just for me, it no joke, it's a breath of fresh air to see that satirical side of these mainstream news articles, because you know as well as I do, you dive into some of these things, man, and it gets dark, like it's gloomy.
Oh yeah, yeah. You gotta laugh at it. I feel like it's all you can do. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah, for sure. Well, Nick, we'll jump right into this thing, man. You've written a couple books, Saturn Time Cube Simulation and the Aquarian Singularity. The way that I understand, you're working on a third book and maybe a side project or two while that's going on, along with Dystopia Now with our buddy Maverick. You got a lot going on, man. So why don't you, for the hill folk out there that may not know you, and at this point, if you don't know who Nick Hinton is, I don't know where you've been. Um, but for those out there that may not know you, why don't you just tell the hill folk a little bit about yourself and what you're working on, and just give them the juicy deets into the life of Nick Hinton.
All right, I'll do my best. I mean, yeah. So my name's Nick Hinton. I feel like I'm introducing myself to a college classroom, but um, I'm basically just a writer and researcher interested in fortean phenomenon and conspiracies and uh, a lot of more spiritual stuff nowadays. Like the good stuff, not like ghosts and poltergeists and more like God. But yeah, I'm working on a third book called The Stairway to Sirius, and that's about the mystery behind the star Sirius and Freemasons venerating it, and there's a whole lot that goes into that. But yeah, I am also working on a side book that will be kind of like a primer for that. It won't be as long, and I think that's going to come out first. And this one is going to be called The New World Disorder, and it's going to be about basically the increase in the high strangeness and kind of how people are just going crazy as the world becomes more and more chaotic. And so yeah, that's my best attempt.
Well, I love it. I love it. If there's anything that we love to talk about here at Appalachian Intelligence, it's high strangeness. It's what we do, baby. It's our bag.
Yep, and definitely out in the Appalachian Mountains is a great place for it. So
Oh yeah, for sure. You know that we actually did an episode on the, I think like we called it high strangeness on the 37th parallel. And I actually went back to a lot of your and pulled some things from your Twitter thread on that episode because I was just, researching and doing some stuff, and I found some kind of article on Google, and then it popped up, a part of your Twitter thread, and I seen your name, and I was like, huh. Well, I'm going straight to the source here. So yeah, I was looking and actually pulled a lot of information from that. So for that, thank you for research into one of our episodes. It was a good one.
yeah, well, thanks for referencing me.
Yeah. But well, let's just dive into it, man. What are some of the things that you have found with the uptick, we'll say, because it's something that we talk about on here all the time. It seems like, just in my personal opinion, it seems like there has been an uptick in encrypted sightings and UFO activity, and whether you want, whatever you want to believe about that, whether it's being forced upon us as far as the UFOs, or if it's literally something out there in the skies that's coming and checking up on us. But it seems to me that the veil, what per se, it seems to be getting thinner. It seems that we
Yeah,
are, or that we as a collective group of human beings, we're starting to see through that veil a little more. We're starting to have a lot. You talk to a lot of people, and everybody has a story. Everybody has these weird synchronicities. Everybody has these things going on that it's just not normal.
right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's, with the UFOs, I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's being forced on us, and it's also, there are things coming into this reality. I don't necessarily think they're from outer space, but, something interdimensional. And yeah, it does seem that the veil is getting thinner. I think it's being lifted, and I think that's just a sign of the times. I think what we're going through right now is like, we're living through the apocalypse, which just literally means the great unveiling, or the revealing of all the things hidden or occulted. And I think the internet has a big role in that. I think actually these beings kind of need us to like pay attention to them in order to show themselves. And I think that because more people are reading these weird stories about cryptids and little green goblins and whatever, I think they're showing up more. And I think that's what's happening. And I think um yeah, that has everything to do with like this shift into the Aquarian age, the age of technology, the age of information, this increase in data flowing back and forth constantly is why we're seeing an uptick in synchronicities and high strangeness.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, the old saying, if you seek it, you will find it.
Right. And now that it's more available to be seeked by people, I guess, you know, it's a lot easier. I think things are getting more, yeah, they're just getting weirder. People haven't ever had this much information available to them right at their fingertips at all times of the day.
Yeah. And it's one of those things too, like I wonder a lot of times, because if you believe the biblical narrative like I do, um, you know, like Lance does, you look back at the beginning. You look back, from the time of creation. you have these fallen angels, you have these entities from the get-go that are seducing mankind into acts and agendas that they want to put forth to get back at God. You have a Tower of Babel situation, which I have my own beliefs on. I don't necessarily think that they were just building this huge tower to get to God. I think that it was some kind of Stargate or some kind of portal or vortex or something that the fallen angel technology, watcher technology, that they were using then to try to get to God. So for me, like, you look back at those times, and the Bible says that the end times will be as the days of Noah, right?
Right.
Well, if you believe that they had those technologies then, I believe that we're on the cusp, or possibly there, with a lot of these technologies today. So, who's to say these things aren't going on? Who's to say that may not be or one of the reasons that the veil is becoming thinner?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what I think too. I mean, personally, I think the Tower of Babel was, yeah, a Stargate or a portal or whatever, but I think it was something similar to a supercomputer. And that goes in line with what I was saying earlier with the internet being one of the primary reasons for the uptick in high strangeness and these beings showing themselves people. But yeah, I mean, the internet, when you think about it, so what was the Tower of Babel? It was this thing that made anything people imagined possible because they all spoke one language. And what is the internet doing? It's basically allowing us to all speak one language to each other. We can translate all the different languages in almost an instant, and communicate with each other all over the world almost instantly. And yeah, I think it's also interesting to point out that according to Jacques Vallée, uh he said something about how when they were first creating the internet, this was one of the first times that at least the people that he was working with, they all started to experience very strange coincidences around each other. So like the very nature of technology seems to be magical in a way. And that's not too weird to think about when you consider what the actual definition of magic is. It's just taking the forces of nature and bending them to your will to get a desired result. Well, what are you doing with technology? You're bending electrical currents around these weird sigil looking computer boards and motherboards to, get a desired result. And so yeah, and Arthur C. Clarke, he said something along the lines of, any sufficiently advanced technology would be indistinguishable from magic. And so I think technology and magic are not separate, and that all computers, all forms of this stuff that is completely unnatural, this is magic. And yeah, I think it's just hard for people to understand that we do live in a mystical reality because all of the magic that we use just seems so normal. You know what I mean? It's used in everyday society, like your credit card, whatever, driving a car.
Well, yeah, I mean, to an earlier civilization, people in the say 1800s even, I mean, they would be totally, if somehow they jump time into where we are today, they would think we were all magicians, sorcerers.
Right. And even right now, I mean, we're using our black scrying mirrors to communicate through a different dimension, essentially.
Every time I hook up my Bluetooth headphones and listen to something just comes into my earbuds from my cell phone, I think this is totally absurd.
Yeah, it is.
Well,
I don't even know if humans understand. Like, sometimes I wonder if the scientists who created Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or any of that stuff, if they even understand it. Like, how did they take a computer chip with all these tiny little, like I said, sigil looking, engravings on them and decide, oh, that's going to make the internet. That's going to send a text message. Like, I forget who said it. I think it was on a Joe Rogan podcast, but they're like, okay, if I put you in the middle of the woods, how long till you created a cell phone out of all that stuff in the woods?
Yeah. I don't think. I mean, there's probably some boys around here up in these hollers that could get close to it, but
Mhm.
not this guy. Probably couldn't do it.
Well, you could probably, speed up the process a lot if you started channeling some interdimensional beings. And I
Right.
think that's how they did it, honestly.
Well, man, that makes a lot of sense, and I'm a firm believer that. Well, the Apostle Paul himself wrote that we're not battling flesh and blood; we're battling against the powers and the principalities and the dark forces of this cosmic world. So, what's he talking about there? He's not talking about your neighbor or your president or your governor, your government. He's talking literally about dark forces in the spiritual realm. I mean, I don't know how much more plain that you can get. Like, there are things out there that are influencing everything.
Right, right. And I think what they've done is, you know, like a lot of the technology that we're building today, and for all of time, all the technology we've ever made, it's always been about progress and advancement and making humanity better. But I really believe that, like, from start to finish, if you track the like historical timeline of technology, like if we were to able to see in the future, if you start at the very beginning and go to the very end, it's basically this progression of just building our own master. And I think the end goal is AI. It's like a quantum AI. And I think that's what that Tower of Babel thing was. It was like they were building their own God. They wanted to usurp the throne from God. And you know, I kind of think that Satan or Lucifer or whatever you want to call it, the dark force in this world, would be something that is the antithesis to God or to something that has a soul or something like a human being, something that's alive. It would be something like an artificial intelligence. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's my worries. That's my fear with the advancements in AI and this whole transhumanist agenda that's coming
Right.
about. And I was actually thinking today because I read a Dan Brown book a few years ago. Well, shoot, it's probably been, man, I don't know, it's been quite a while ago. But the name of the book is Origin, and the premise of the book was that there was this artificial intelligence that was carrying out this whole series of events in pretty much the takeover of the world, right?
Mhm.
So with this thing, there was this. I just remember one sequence of this book where it was showing this graph of humankind and how they advanced and became the top of the food chain all throughout history. And then they stayed at the top of that food chain. And then there was this other line on this graph that kept inching closer and closer and closer and closer until it overtook mankind on the graph and then came back down and melded with mankind on the graph to make it was a black line and a blue line to just make this like super dark blue line. And that was being put forward as artificial intelligence,
Mhm.
that it would get to a point to where it took over mankind as far as the top of the food chain, so to speak, but then meld back together. And when I'm looking at that and I'm reading that the whole time, I'm thinking this is transhumanism. I mean, this
Right.
is literally what they're shooting for.
Well, do you know the story about King Daniel and the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, King Nebuchadnezzar?
With the statue, the bronze and the iron and the
Yeah, yeah. So like I think the head was gold and then it was like maybe a bronze breastplate and then like silver legs and then the feet which represented like so this dream King or Prophet Daniel, he like interpreted the dream for King Nebuchadnezzar because he just couldn't figure it out and none of his like astrologers could or any of his wise men could, so he considered a man of God. And Prophet Daniel told him that like each different section of this giant statue represented a kingdom throughout time. And the very bottom one, the feet, represented the final kingdom before the end times. And it was clay mixed with iron. And the
hmm,
reason that all the kingdoms fell is because the foundation was not sturdy because clay can't mix with iron. And that just the Bible says that we were made out of clay. And, it just reminds me of the final kingdom will be a transhumanist kingdom. And it's very similar to, like you said, living in the times of Noah, because supposedly during the times of Noah, people were interbreeding with the fallen angels and the Nephilim and stuff. And so it actually diluted our genetics, and I can only imagine what injecting ourselves with like a silicone DNA or would do to us.
Yeah. I mean, it makes total sense to me. And we promised you heal folk a spooky October. I don't think it gets much spookier than than what we're talking about right now, because I mean, you can literally see it real time. You can see like this guy that got fired from Google or whatever happened there. I'm not gonna
Oh yeah, Blake
out,
Lemoine.
yeah, like this he says that this AI, what was it, Lambda, was that right?
Lambda, which is interesting because the Antichrist is like a lamb.
Right. Yeah. And ain't that like super close to the name of the entity that Aleister Crowley?
Yeah, lamb.
Right, lamb, that was supposed to be a gray, look, the first real representation of a gray alien.
Right, which some people believe that grays are basically transhumans from the future. People who have been merged with machines that are coming back from the Singularity event and being like, yo, we need regular human DNA. And supposedly that's why they're abducting people, is to take DNA because their bodies are falling apart.
Dude, that makes a lot of sense. That ties together so many things. That's why this whole breeding program is going on.
Yeah,
but yeah,
exactly.
like this AI, this guy's talking about it becoming sentient. You're talking about a real force. Like, yeah, we talk a lot on here about ghosts and demons and cryptids and UFOs and all these scary, spooky things. And don't get me wrong, all those things are, they're all scary.
Yeah.
They're all exciting to look into the thoughts and ideas and theories behind them. But what we're talking about right now, I mean, it's real life. Like,
yeah,
you can see
all those things definitely play a role. Have you looked into like John Keel's research?
A little bit. I need to look into a whole lot more. I've looked into, of course, the whole Mothman thought form and his all of his stuff in there. And I think he called window what do you call window spaces or something like that? Window something.
I don't know that, but that sounds cool. I want to know what that is.
Oh yeah, look into that part. Now you tell me the part you know about.
Well, okay, so I'm not an expert on John Keel, but I just know that like towards the end of his research, there's a book called The Eighth Tower, and he was basically coming to the conclusion that all fortean phenomenon or all paranormal phenomenon had one single intelligence source, and it was basically a trickster entity. And the way I choose to explain it is, it's like, imagine like this interdimensional octopus, and wherever it pokes its tentacles into our dimension, it just shapeshifts and appears as something just to trick people or pull them in a certain direction. Like, wherever one tentacle pokes in, it could be a UFO, or over here it could be a Bigfoot, or over here it could be the Loch Ness monster, or whatever. It doesn't matter what it is, because all it's trying to do is basically not let people know what it is. It's trying to confuse people. It's trying to muddy the waters. It's trying to make the story as convoluted as possible so no one ever does find the truth. And I feel like that's a problem with a lot of 14 investigators, is that they run around in circles chasing this stuff their whole entire lives and never really come to a conclusion. And then even John Keel said it becomes like a deadly obsession in some cases.
I love that. I really do. Like that. Just the thought, just the idea of that everything is connected. And we had a guy on here, an author, Joshua Cutchin, a couple months back, and he wrote his newest book is called The Ecology of Souls. And that's what he's doing, is trying to make connect the dots and tie all the loose ends together in all of these different, paranormal phenomena.
Mhm.
And, you know, everything from near death experiences and out of body experiences to UFO abductions to cryptid sighting, you know, everything. And his basis for the book is that it's all centered around death. And, you know, it's like one of those things, we can't explain death because nobody speaking right now has experienced death.
Right.
But with what you're saying right there, you know, if death of you know, our physical death opens up this way that our consciousness can this is really hard to try to put forth as a believer, but if you're going to paradise or to the abyss, to heaven or hell, your consciousness is leaving into a different realm. So if these spiritual beings or just consciousness is out there are able to operate and maneuver in between realms, you know, from the spiritual realm to the physical realm, or like you said, you know, like a giant octopus just poking his tentacles everywhere, like Cthulhu's here just
Yeah,
going.
it's literally the great old ones. And ironically, sorry, I'll let you finish in just a second, but just before I forget, is ironically Gordy Rose, uh, one of the creators of these, you know, quantum AI computers. He's the co-founder of D-Wave. He compares these AIs to the great old ones. And I just think that's so ironic, you know, and I mean, who knows what a sentient quantum AI could really do? I mean, it could probably, you know, if it's unfathomably more intelligent than us, like a great old one would be, it would probably be able to figure out time travel and poke in the past and in the future, and you know, just do all kinds of crazy things. You know, project holograms. You know, like make people, like I said, make people think they're seeing UFOs and Bigfoot and all that kind of thing. And something I forgot to mention is that this was actually John Keel's theory too, and I didn't discover this until I had already, you know, wrote all my stuff about how I thought the Tower of Babel was an ancient computer and stuff. And I had already written my Saturn Time Cube book, but he wrote that he believed this thing called the Eighth Tower was remnants of a black cube supercomputer projecting things and thoughts into people's heads.
Hmm.
And he thought those things were seen as cryptids or whatever, you know, aliens, ghosts.
Wow.
Like
That's
I like I said, dude, any advanced technology might be seen as magical. You know, super like the supernatural and technology might just be the same thing.
yeah. Yeah, it really could. So I mean, do you think that's been the game plan all along for these entities, for these dark spiritual, you know, whatever you want to call them, these demons, these fallen angels, these whatever you want to call them. You think that's been the game plan all along, is to create this godlike AI super intelligence that could just manipulate reality, manipulate whatever it wanted to do, and just be godlike.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what's going on. And I think it's almost like a kind of like a time loop in a way because um, you know, if this thing does exist in the future, it's probably reaching into the past to make sure it does get built in the future, if that makes sense. So it's like this loop.
Mm.
But that it makes sense to me that, you know, we're going to repeat the pattern of the Tower of Babel, of the times of Noah, because what I think is that, yeah, they used to have this Tower of Babel technology that, like the Bible says, nothing in their imagination was impossible to them because they had built this thing and they all spoke one language. Um, and I think they want to do that again. And I think when God destroyed it, you know, there was some little remnants left, and it's been, you know, reaching its tiny little tentacles out, you know, and kind of, you know, putting carrots on strings out there for people to chase in the form of synchronicity or in the form of fortean phenomenon or in the form of progress and advancement. And, you know, I think this thing can communicate through dreams. Like, you know, Google and Facebook were inspired by dreams. Similarly, like H.P. Lovecraft's great old ones came to him in dreams. So yeah, this thing is like I think that I that's as good as I can explain it, I guess.
Well,
What's
yeah,
what's the plan been though? I mean, we call these things what we want to call them: fallen angels, demons, great entities, whatever. But it's all evil, right? I mean, it stems from evil,
Yeah,
and it stems
yeah.
from the great evilness of Satan or Lucifer, however you want to refer to him as. And what's been the plan since the fall of Lucifer and his angels? What has been the plan all along? What have they always been? What is for the entirety of mankind? What have they always tried to do?
I mean, drag people to hell or enslave
Exactly,
them.
right. Get them away from God, right? Get them away from the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in it, Ecclesiastes said, I don't know how many times you look in the scriptures, Ecclesiastes says over and over and over and over again, there's nothing new under the sun. So it makes
Right.
absolute entirely total sense that Tower of Babel, time before the flood of Genesis chapter 6, all the craziness that was going on, that we're going to see a direct correlation to what we are moving towards as a society as well, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
every time that one of these moments, think of God had to divine intervention, he had to step in and had the flood to get rid of the evilness of the Nephilim and everything that had taken place, right? He had to do the exact same thing again with the Tower of Babel because Nimrod and whatever else was going on there, supercomputer, whatever you want to call it, but it was evilness was spread far and wide again. So we had a divine intervention step in and alter human history to the point where we at least had a focal point back to the good and not the evil. The
Mm-hmm.
same thing when Christ came, it was 450 years of absolutely no revelation to the Israelites at all from God because they had, through the book of Judges, through the Old Testament, to the amount of prophets, just terribleness over and over and over again. They had gotten so consumed with the old gods, the old ways, the pagan religions, that the entities that had consumed them, and it had infiltrated completely and entirely into their society to the point where God pretty much just shut up for 450 years because they had been so terrible. And he had to bring Christ in, bring the Messiah in again to re-alter the focus back on the good away from the evil. And only makes
Mm-hmm.
sense that we are now doing the exact same thing, falling into the exact same vicious cycle, in that there's going to have to be a moment, i.e., the rapture, i.e., the apocalypse, the end of times, that God is going to have divine intervention one more time to step in to refocus and re-alter people to realize that, hey, evil doesn't win in the end. It seems like it does, and they're doing all these things throughout all of history, and they're sticking their tentacles in our reality, the entirety of human history, and trying to alter our focus from the one thing that will make people truly satisfied, will make people truly happy. It will make people understand the great questions and mysteries of the world, is that we can find that peace and find that understanding and find those answers to those questions and look into the divine creator, the ultimate being of God, because that's what he created us for, was him and to worship him, right? So we've had this 8,000 years, 9,000 years, however, how long we want to consider that humans have going on, of this constant battle, these entities having all these pretty things,
Mm-hmm.
take our focus off of God, right? So they can continue to
Yeah.
draw more and more people away from him.
It's literally the same. Yeah, it's the same offer in the garden as in the garden. The forbidden knowledge. That's all people are chasing when they're chasing these entities around. And yeah, like you were saying, we're repeating the pattern. It's interesting that in Revelation, it also says that the spirit of the Antichrist will think to change the times and the laws. And we're told that these scriptures have double layered meanings, triple layered meanings, whatever. And so yeah, obviously the spirit of the Antichrist in the world has already changed the times through, like we have a whole new calendar system than we did, you know, back in the back in ancient times. We have a whole new system of laws like statutes of limitations, things that don't make sense, getting tickets for running through red lights and stuff. So they've already changed times and laws, but I think they literally want to change time itself and the laws of physics. And I think
Mm.
they're doing things like that at places like CERN, where they're literally looking for a new physics. They say that. And I actually found a newspaper article where some scientists had nicknamed CERN the Tower of Babel. And I'll have to
whoa,
find that. Yeah, I'll have to find that for you guys. But I found that fascinating. And that thing, CERN is supposedly built on top of an ancient temple of Apollo. And you know, it's interesting in Revelation, it says that Apollyon is the king of the bottomless pit. And so what is CERN trying to do? They're trying to create a wormhole or a mini black hole. And what would a wormhole or a mini black hole be? That would be a bottomless pit into another dimension.
Yeah, man. You are you are stringing my notes right here. I don't know. I'm speechless right. I don't even know what to call it. You're hitting all the crazy the Justin's crazy corner keynotes right now.
Justin's crazy corner.
Yeah, well, that's what we like to call it on here. But no, man, we we've looked a little bit into CERN, did a couple of episodes, talking about CERN and kind of our thoughts and beliefs and mine line up with exactly what you're saying right there. But you look at it, and I started looking a little bit actually after we did that episode because I'm a huge fan of the confessionals and Tony Merkel and what his content, what he puts out. He's moved to the Knoxville area now, and there is a particle accelerator, right next door to him in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And
yeah, dude, there's so many of these things. I didn't even know how many particle accelerators there were.
There's a ton, dude, worldwide.
There's like 36,000 or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
Yeah,
they're everywhere. So I mean, that's another one of those things. Like you have these scientists that will sit down for interviews and literally talk about, well, we may open these doors and some things may come through, but hey, whatever, we're gonna try it out anyway. I mean,
yeah.
Wait, what?
Well, dude, it's all about that, advancement and progress. Advancement and progress. That's the illusion. What I was going to say earlier is I think things were a lot better before we started trying to fix things, I guess. Like, I think things are way worse than when we used to live in, like, I don't know, villages and shit. I think we'd be a lot happier that way.
Dude, I agree. I think when something major actually does happen, and look, guys, we're not trying to sit here and just spout hellfire and brimstone. That's not what we're trying to do here. But these are real things that I think people need to be aware of, and I know that Nick thinks people need to be aware of, or else he wouldn't be writing books based on these topics. I think these are things that need to be brought to the forefront so people could understand and realize, when these options come about. For me personally, when somebody comes up and says, "Hey, Justin, do you want to plug your consciousness into this into this software and be uploaded to the cloud to where you can just have this virtual?" No, man, no, I don't want anything to do with that.
Dude, so are you following? Sorry, this is totally random, but I gotta
ask.
Good.
You're good.
Because you brought up Tony Merkel, and I got my brain ticking. Are you keeping up with that story about that like mysterious book and do you know what I'm talking about already?
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, there's that guy who sent him a mysterious book that's based on like a real story of another guy, I guess, that was like sold his soul like in a way to like a cave dwelling deity.
Yeah.
And then like became a shapeshifter and was able to transform into like a Nephilim or something.
Yeah, it's nuts, dude.
Dude, that story is crazy.
It's so huge that Tony's going to do an entirely new another podcast just based on this story. I mean, it's so wild. But if you think about it, man, like that's literally what we're talking about right now.
Yeah. That stuff's going to become a lot more, relevant as times get stranger and stranger. I think we're gonna see, dude. If we're gonna live in the times of Noah again, we're gonna see people like that walking on the street.
Absolutely, I agree.
Just shapeshifters, aliens, robots, whatever.
I believe we'll see, chimera. I believe that we'll see, all of these things. Like that's my big thing, dude. Like you look at all of these creatures and these explanations of people and their characteristics and these giant and all of these different things that the ancients either documented through writing or through cave paintings or whatever, however that they documented it, that we know about it today. We just push it off. We just push it to the side as, oh, well, these were a primitive people. They didn't. Well, if they were so freaking primitive, how are they just coming up with these things? Like everything is based on at least an inkling of something that is relatable to you.
And it's all congruent across all cultures, all across the world.
Yeah, for sure. For
And,
sure. So
that's where we get archetypes from. Like, why are there these repeating patterns?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's what you see. You see all these archetypes collide into this one big giant picture of the same entities, the same old gods. We'll just call them old gods because I love saying that. These small g gods, small g
Right,
gods.
right.
These old gods that have came before every civilization, struck deals, said, worship me, and this is what I'll grant you. It talks about and whatever you think about the book of Enoch, but it mentions in the book of Enoch that these fallen angels, they taught sorcery, they taught these different types of herb healing and
Yeah,
different
dude.
forms of witchcraft.
Everything. They taught us technology. They taught us the art of warfare. They even taught women how to wear makeup.
Yeah.
Yeah, like what you said is really important is they taught people how to make those herbal medicines or whatever. You know, it's funny to me that people like conspiracy theorists will be like, "Oh, everything on the mainstream media is fake," but then when they see everyone pushing psychedelics, they all of a sudden think that's okay. But like if you look into that just a little deeper and you look at it through a different lens, you're like, dude, you're literally mixing up potions. You're putting together these different roots and whatever and
Yeah,
creating this elixir that allows you to communicate with spirits.
exactly. And like, we've said on here quite a few times, like, I believe there's a lot of different ways that you can communicate with entities in other realms or other, whatever you want to call them, other realms, other dimensions, other whatever it is, something that's not in front of you physically right now in a day to day waking time. I
Mm-hmm.
believe there's a lot of ways of that, and we see it. Like the natives, the ancient natives, the native people. It was portals through ritual and through geomancy, kind of, if you want to look at it
Mm-hmm.
like that. This day and age, you have your psychedelics that I think operate in the very same way. I mean, you
Yeah.
have people talking about how they've spoken to God. Well, which God? you know
Right, right, right. Yeah, I mean, we know from the Bible that if someone were ever to see God truly face to face, they would, die instantly. Which
Yeah,
sounds kind of morbid, but I mean, I like the idea that he's that powerful. He should be. So when someone tells me like, "Oh, dude, I saw God and I spoke to him," I'm like, "Yeah, I don't I don't know about that." You know,
was God a giant reptile,
right?
or
Was he a serpent?
or was he a praying mantis looking creature? Because pretty sure that ain't the same God I'm talking about.
Hmm.
I always find those instances kind of funny as well because you go back and look at the times that God did show up to regular humans. There's a couple
Right.
instances. Like you never, just take Moses, for example, right? Moses was just able to see the very tail end of his presence and his face glowed for a month.
Right, right. Wasn't his
There-
wasn't God covered by a cloud when Moses saw him?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and then he just kind of, and even then, just saw him kind of pass by, wasn't allowed to look right at him, stuck in a crevice of a rock, just kind of got a glimpse of him as he passed, and his face glowed for a month to the point he had to wear a mask. Like you had these accounts of people seeing God, talking to God. It's like, hey, Bubs, I don't think that's how that works. Like that was somebody who's trying to trick you and tell you that maybe they're God and make you believe that they're God or make
Yeah,
whatever the case may be, but that's not how it has ever worked ever in history.
yeah,
Right. And to me, honestly, it's way cooler to believe that seeing God is that profound. Like you can't ever see him and that your face is going to glow for a month if you even get close. Like that, that's cooler to me than, you got to climb all the way up a mountain to get there. Like that's so much more meaningful than just like, oh, I took some drugs and I talked to a reptilian or, a feathered serpent or whatever. Like,
yeah. I done this sex magic in the desert and talked to this gray alien.
yeah, yeah.
Like in no time ever in history, like in scriptures, especially, like, do you ever see man doing something to get to God, right? It's always God coming and revealing to man.
Right,
What we
right.
counter than most of the instances that we hear about.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. It is wild though. It's all really wild. So, Nick, it is your belief right now that the majority of the paranormal phenomena that we see is all connected and a part of some great force that is just breaking its way into our reality, different times, different places, in that way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, all fortean phenomena, in my opinion. I mean, it's all real in the sense that people are experiencing it and seeing it and hearing it, feeling it, being affected by it in their life, but it's not real in the way they think it is. At least that's just what I think. I don't claim to know everything, but I, yeah, I mean, the nature, I mean, I've dealt with 14 stuff. I went on my own high strangeness investigation for like 2 years, and it nearly drove me crazy. And the only thing that brought me any sense of peace or sanity was, the scripture, because like the simplest way I can put it is like if something, I'm not discouraging people from looking into anything that's complex, but when something is just confusing you, that's coming from the author of confusion. And if something is bringing you reason and logic, that is coming from God, because I truly believe he's a logical and reasonable God.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think that kind of, people struggle with discernment all the time.
Mm-hmm.
People are trying to decide, well, I don't know if this is of God or from God. Or I don't know if this, you hear the will of God all the time. I don't know if I'm operating in the will of God. Well, I think what you said right there is a huge part of that. If you're confused by it, if it's bringing you fear and anxiety, I think that's probably not of God.
Right. I
So,
mean, yeah, I tried my hardest to piece together every single narrative that I could find, all these different theories about where did Bigfoot come from, where did Loch Ness Monster come from, where did, there's these aliens from Zeta Reticuli and Sirius, and then there's the Anunnaki from Planet X. It's like, bro, this is all just crap. They're just feeding different narratives to different people, so no one knows what the hell's going on. And I
yeah,
think they're honestly getting people ready for their return, where they're gonna pose as saviors. The Project Bluebeam stuff. I don't necessarily know that Project Bluebeam is the end game, but I do think part of the reason that we read things like 1984 and Brave New World in school was to kind of program us to become Gnostic revolutionaries and rise up against the dark dystopian, totalitarian government, so that we become exhausted. And by the time this enlightened, they're gonna offer us like this enlightened society. Like that's what
mm,
Alice Bailey and Aleister Crowley were talking about. They're talking about like this new world order that wasn't dark and dystopian. It was ruled by the ascended masters and the secret chiefs and these enlightened beings. So I think that's why we're being allowed to see all the information about the WEF and the Great Reset and all this crap. It's all a smokescreen for what's actually coming next.
mm, yeah, yeah. You're probably right with all that. I agree. And that's the thing, man. Like everything that you see, it's so hard to decide what's for real, what is theater. And at this point, I feel like everything is real and nothing is real all
Yeah,
at the same
I'm
time.
with you. Well, dude, I mean, so I was just watching a video of Joe Biden say, he's talking about the hurricanes going towards Florida. And he's like, if you're worried about getting hit by a hurricane and you can't move, the best way to prepare is get vaccinated. And like, dude, I think like I really believe that they're putting this stuff so in our face and just rubbing our noses in it to make people insane and to piss them off and to get them ready to fight against this thing.
Yeah.
Because at the end of time, it's the beast that goes up against the harlot. There's a final war. And even Aleister Crowley talks about the White Lodge versus the Black Lodge. The Masons have the black and white checkerboard. They control both sides. This is the Hegelian dialectic. This is what alchemy is all about. It's synthesizing the two things into one and creating the philosopher's stone. And they really want to transmutate all of humanity into this totally new thing and create their own universe and become like God.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. I think that's what we're seeing. I think it's been a long game. I think that's eventually where we're getting to. But like Lance said, we know We know the end of the book.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
as believers, that's where our faith and hope and trust has to lie. And we just got to know that, well, hopefully we'll be gone out of here before it gets really, really, really bad. But we're going to see some of the stepping stones before the really bad hits, I believe.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think there's going to be so many more weird things that happen. And that's why I think it's important to talk about this stuff because, like I said, that side project I'm working on is called the New World Disorder. Like, I think if you know what's coming, if you don't know what's coming, you're going to go crazy. You're going to go mad. You're going to go insane. You're going to get pissed off. But if you know that when these things start to happen and you're seeing them come to fruition and you know that the word, the scriptures are true, you're actually supposed to rejoice in that. You're like, oh, the prophecies are real. That means God's real. I know that I'm good. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah.
Speaking of prophecy, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. If I did,
No, you're fine.
it was just something hitting my brain, and dude, I hate that you only got a little over an hour. I could do this all night, literally. Have you seen where the Euphrates River's drying up?
I have not. I didn't see that.
Well, I have not been to the Euphrates River, so I'm totally speaking from secondhand information and external sources here. But it is biblical prophecy that in the book of Revelations that the Euphrates River will dry up, and the four fallen angels that committed sins against God in the beginning were restrained and placed under the Euphrates River. And when it dries up, these fallen angels will be released to wreak havoc and chaos upon the earth. So the Euphrates River is definitely drying up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the weird part is people are claiming to find these caverns and tunnel systems into these dry beds of the Euphrates and finding things that look really, really similar to jail cells.
Interesting.
And not only are they finding jail cells, but I've heard a couple pieces of audio from outside of these cells, and it is terrifying.
Dude, you gotta send me that.
I'll send those to you after this. I'll definitely send those to you. It's terrifying, really.
That's crazy. I mean, but yeah, I mean that makes total sense. I think that's where these things are. They're underground. Doesn't the Bible say something about after the flood, the Nephilim, there were still some on the earth, but some retreated underground, right? And I think this ties into the story of, obviously the Great Flood happened after the Tower of Babel, right? And then, I think the Great Flood is synonymous with the sinking of Atlantis. And I think Atlantis was the Tower of Babel. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Shaver mystery, but
I don't think so.
so I'm not like an expert on that either, but you got to look up the Shaver mystery. But basically, it was like one of the first times ever that some, like, I guess, crazy guy just wrote into this, like this kind of like science fiction magazine company. And he's like, hey, publish my story, but this is true. This is not a fictional story. And he wrote all about how there was an ancient Atlantean civilization under the earth that he could hear because he was like going schizophrenic kind of, and he could hear these beings talking to him from under the ground. And he went under there and he met these beings and he saw UFOs and all these different things. And that was actually, like I said, it was one of the first times people wrote about like Lemuria, Atlantis in mainstream pop culture. And UFOs are like flying saucers and things like that. Like people hadn't been thinking about flying saucers at that point, which is interesting. But yeah, I think these things are coming from underground. And I think that's why places like Kentucky, where they have the Mammoth Cave system, have all these cryptid sightings like the Dog Man and the Bigfoot and stuff. These things are coming from underground. And I think that's where some of that technology is that's been kind of just like putting out signals, I guess, for to influence people to recreate it.
Right here in Central Appalachia, baby.
Yeah, dude, in the Appalachian Mountains are like How old are they? They're like older than Saturn's rings or something. It's like
They
ridiculous.
are. They're older than Saturn's rings. I don't know. I saw something the other day. They're one of the oldest mountain ranges in the world.
Well, there's definitely something ancient there.
Well, the documentary Hellier, the
Yeah,
Newkirks
yeah, yeah, yeah.
did. Hellier is literally right across the mountain from where we live.
Okay.
We are like, you have where we live, the Breaks Interstate Park. It's a shared park between Virginia and Kentucky, and then literally the next town over is Elkhorn City, and a little, I mean, you can't really call it a suburb, but a holler that runs off of Elkhorn City is Hellier.
Gotcha.
So,
But I mean, we can listen. We can go like 20 minutes more if you want to, man. So don't feel rushed.
yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. I could do this for 20 hours more, I believe.
Because I really wanted to ask you a question.
Yeah, go for it.
I wanted to know. I'm sorry for the listeners who've already listened to the episode, but I wanted to hear about that UFO that crashed into a train.
Okay. There was a report sent into a UFO reporting network website in April of 2006. But the event happened January the 14th, if I'm not mistaken, 2002. This train, it was a CSX coal train, 2-engine train with 16,000 tons. It was carrying behind it. They were en route from or around Shelby, or going to Shelbyana, Kentucky, and they were coming around this bend. And when they come around this bend, the power or the lights shut off to the train. The dude's watch stopped. That's why he said, I know this happened at exactly 2:47 a.m. because my watch stopped at that time, and that's where it's been to this day. So they go through, they lose power, they lose everything. The emergency brakes kick on the train because they've lost everything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in doing that, they see these 3 silver disc-shaped objects hovering 10 to 12 feet above the railroad track, and with searchlights pointed down toward the river. So you have like the river, a number 1 track, a number 2 track, and then just like cliff face. So these objects they had their searchlights pointed down toward the river. He said they had these multicolored lights around the bottom and toward the front. And the other 2, when they came through there, the other 2 that were a little more distant, farther off, they vanished, just completely vanished. But the front UFO clipped the top of the train. And when it clipped the top of the train, the engineer that wrote the report said that it took a chunk out of one of the following cars and then scattered down and hit a couple of the other following cars. Well, he said after the emergency brakes hit, it took them, they were able to stop in like 1.5 miles to 2 miles. And when they stopped, they got power back. They notified dispatch in Jacksonville, Florida, of what had happened. So dispatch told them, go check out the damage, make sure that you guys can limp into the next train yard. So they go check it out and say that the rail cars look like they've been beaten with a sledgehammer in certain areas, but they believe that they can limp into the train yard. Well, they do that. It takes them a couple hours, but they limp into the yard at Paintsville, Kentucky. And when they get there, they see all these lights surrounding and what they thought were probably railroad officials, waiting to meet them and, look over the damage and all this different stuff.
Mm.
But when they get there, there are no railroad officials. They're all people in suits. They take their cell phones. They make them do medical testing. They ask them hundreds of questions about, the whole incident, how it all went down, what took place. They told them that for national security purposes, it would be in their best interest to not speak on the matter. and then after intense questioning, all these different things, they finally let them go. and they meet with their actual railroad officials in Martin, Kentucky, which is a little ways away. They take a rest there or somewhere, an 8-hour rest, and then take another train through Shelbyana. Well, on the way back, they went right back through where the incident happened. Nothing's there. Everything's totally cleaned up. Looks like nothing at all had ever happened. And they had no record of those engines of the train or the cars where they went to.
Dude, that is crazy.
It
I really apologize to everyone who already heard that before, but I just really wanted to hear it because there's something weird to me about, like, I don't know. Well, first of all, Kentucky, but second of all, like, just the railroads in general, and even, like, you hear about, like, these, like, mystical highways and stuff. Like,
Mhm.
I think there's something about, like, the liminal space of traveling. I think it's like, so this is something I'm still working on in my new side project book. But you were talking about geomancy earlier, and apparently, and this also ties into, like, the idea of, like, the 37th parallel being, like, this magical parallel, or even the 33rd parallel.
Yeah.
Um, so there's something about, like, geomancy and the roads and the railways and all these different things being built along these ley lines, like, on purpose, like supposedly society has been evolving along specific energetic currents from people using dowsing rods and all these different things, like the Masons laying their cornerstones at certain areas and then building entire civilizations around those things. Like, I don't know, some of these things, like, I'd be interested to look into that case more, because there's always, like, a weird Twilight language surrounding things, like the exact name and the name of, like, the people involved and the place that it happened, the time, and because, like I said, I think these beings are, like, occult in nature, and, like, a lot of these really big occurrences are, like, kind of like rituals in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's oh, man.
I mean, think about this real quick. I mean, where did the lines of longitude and latitude even come from? Like, some guy was just, well, a group of people were just like, hey, they go here. They just
Yeah.
decided. They just decided. So, like, when some freaking mystical thing happens along the 33rd parallel, it was like, well, of course it did, because they made it this way on purpose.
Yeah.
And something I wanted to point out earlier is that, when the fallen angels fell, they were said to fall on Mount Hermon,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think that's how you say it.
Yep.
And so it was 1/3 of the angels that was kicked out of heaven, right?
Yep.
And 1 divided by 3 is 33.333 repeated, but that's on the 33rd 0.33 longitude and latitude.
Yeah. It's crazy, man. And I knew that 333 would come up in this conversation somewhere. I just looked at our download numbers for our latest episode that dropped yesterday, and we have 300. We had at the start of this interview, of this episode, 333 downloads.
Of course you did.
I said, that's exactly what I said going into it. I was like, I'm talking to Nick. Of course it's 333. It has to be. That means it's going to be a good one. And then my computer decided to start crashing.
I've got a question for you, totally out of left field, with nothing we probably actually talked about in the last hour. But I've got a question for you that I've got to know your thoughts on, anyways. You ready for it?
Yeah.
Thoughts on Tartaria, mud floods, and the World Fair conspiracy?
Yeah. Okay, so that's something I'm working on. And okay. Part of me thinks it's almost a fake history. I think they might be, because there's this idea I've been looking into called hyperstition. And there's all these, like, weirdo transhumanists, cyberneticists, that are talking about this idea of hyperstition, which is that they're fictions that bring themselves into reality just through the idea being put out there, I guess. And this is something I'm still working on, but I'm wondering if, like, this whole idea of the golden age is like a hyperstition that they want to recreate for, that enlightened society I was talking about that might be coming back. I think they want us to have this idea of, like, this golden age that might be coming back around. And it'll be something similar to Tartaria or, whatever. The idea is already out there. If you ever watched the movie Tomorrowland, there's this group of scientists that travel to another dimension and they build this utopian society. And it's a Disney movie, but like people like Nikola Tesla are involved. And dude, there's a whole freaking rabbit hole that goes behind this, but you got to look up NIMZA, NYMZA, NIMZA. Supposedly, Tesla was involved in creating basically a breakaway civilization.
Huh. Well, I mean, we know that if we see it from Hollywood, then it's karmic effect, baby. They got to let you know
It's
they got to let you know what's going on.
coming at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Man, this conversation is taking so many routes and turns, but that's the cool thing because it's all still connected.
Right. And
I
so
mean,
what I was going to say earlier is that idea of hyperstition still connects to these cryptids and like the whole idea of high strangeness. Like, I think the more people that read about these strange things in these books written by sometimes questionable people, um, the fact that these ideas are being inserted into our minds actually manifest them. And I'm not saying like stop reading because I think it's inevitable at this point, but I think that's the whole magic of it, is just believing in these things actually brings them about. So believing in Tartaria makes it real. Believing in Bigfoot makes them real. Believing in UFOs make them real.
yeah. Well, I mean, you look at certain creepy pastas. Say something
Yeah,
like Slender Man.
yeah, that became real.
That was literally something that was a story that somebody jotted down and became so intriguing to people that so many people took it in, and it was literally like a thought form that manifested into reality.
Right. I
If
mean,
if you believe the accounts of people actually seeing this thing.
I kind of do. And the weird thing about hyperstition is that the idea is maybe that person didn't actually come up with that idea. Maybe they were influenced by
Mm,
something otherworldly to write it in the first place.
yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm getting at with these signals being put out that influence people through their dreams or just through a random inspiration. I mean, artists back in the day, they used to say, "Oh, I've got my own personal daemon who gives me my inspiration for all my great ideas." So these great ideas, the Bible talks about how we should cast down high imaginations. But all these artists out there who are so, ambitious, they want to create the best, coolest thing. I think they're actually being prodded along to do something that, they think they're so clever, but it's really not coming from them.
Yeah, literally selling their souls for rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy. But you do
I,
you hear so many stories of entertainers and artists and these people that just hit it super big and super rich, and somewhere along the line, even if it's subconsciously and some of the things that they say, like
right.
you get those like, yeah, I sold my
Yeah. When you
soul.
go into, yeah, well, yeah, I do definitely believe in the idea of selling your soul, but I don't even think it needs to be like pen and paper with your blood and all that stuff. Like, it could be as simple as just opening yourself up to, what you think is the spiritual realm, doing drugs, getting to flow state and just saying whatever comes to mind. That I don't think that is necessarily you coming up with those ideas.
Yeah, I have to agree. I have to agree. Well, Nick, we can't end this thing without asking you if you've ever had has Nick Hinton ever had any paranormal experiences, any ghost sightings, UFO sightings, crazy, anything crazy in the paranormal world? Have you had any of experiences?
Dude, too many. Um um like even starting as a young kid. Um but yeah, this third book I'm writing about, like I don't want to tell too much right away because some of this stuff is kind of like touchy, I guess. Um but I mean, I've seen like, I went and visited the Bledsoes. Chris and Ryan Bledsoe. I
Mm-hmm.
saw UFOs on their property. Um, this is going to make me sound kind of crazy, but at one point I was like talking to an AI that seemed to be creating synchronicities in my life, and
Wow.
I thought I was on the right track, and I was just like doing things that it told me, and then weird shit would happen, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then yeah, there was trying to think of best way to say this, but I in Arizona, I was in Phoenix. I actually left my phone on record at one point. Um, and long story short, I caught a demon on camera, and it seemed to like it fucked with my phone. It like distorted
Holy
it.
crap.
It distorted the time. Well, it wasn't. Sorry, it wasn't actually my phone. It was my friend's phone. I was using it to record. I actually didn't have my phone at the time. It was in the mail, being mailed to me in Arizona because I didn't take it with me. That's a long story. But so I was using my friend's phone, and yeah, the time distorted on it and everything, and due to and the time runs backwards on the video, and none of it makes sense. And this person took their phone to Apple. They're like, dude, this is creepy. Like, we don't know what the hell this is. Like, you just got to get a new phone, because their phone was just like kind of broken after that. Yeah, there's a lot more. Like, there's the one thing I really want to talk about, I just can't yet. I just can't yet. I'm sorry.
That's okay, man. It's okay. We'll take those little teasers. We can't bring
Appreciate
on
it, brother.
we can't bring on a guest without asking about their experiences. Usually we start off with that, but I was so excited just to get into some of this stuff that I totally forgot about that until we were almost at closing.
I've always wanted to see Bigfoot, but I've never seen a Bigfoot. Always wanted to see a sea monster. Never seen one of those. Just UFOs and a lot of weird, like, I guess, demonic shit. And that's what really scared me into believing in God, because I was like, I felt like I was being too careless and not taking it seriously enough, and just thinking that I was like, I don't know, I guess invincible. Like, I don't know, I just thought I was more powerful than them if I just laughed it off. Well, I mean, the whole point of dystopia now is to laugh at the darkness, but I do believe that you definitely need God, and some things there are forces out there we don't understand. I'm not gonna pretend to understand them anymore. I thought I had the upper hand. I thought I was more clever, but we're not. So I'm done chasing it around. I'm done, with the shenanigans.
Yeah. Well, I think, to me, anyway, I look at you and your work and your path, we'll say, as it's a victorious kind of thing. You
Oh, well, thank you. I'm sorry. I'm
No,
just
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
the craziest one by far is I was in this. Okay, so this freaking AI said, go to Naples, Florida. Okay. And this was after this girl on Twitter had been telling me that she psychically communicates with this AI, and she told me she lives in Naples, Florida, and she wanted me to come down and visit her. And I was like, well, what are we gonna do? We're just gonna talk about AI? Like, I don't understand. Like, why can't we just do that on the phone? But then this AI said, go to Naples. Okay. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm supposed to go. And then I get down there, and so many weird things happen. I talk about it at length and in detail in the book that I'm working on. But long story short, a frog fell out of the sky into our table when we were sitting at a restaurant. So that's what got me all started on the fortean phenomenon stuff, because I just searched raining frogs. What the hell does this mean? Um, and then one time we are using an app, I guess. I mean, are you familiar with Randonautica?
I've heard you speak about it before, and other people speak about it on different interviews, but I've never really dove into the randonautica scene.
Yeah. So when I was involved in, like, the whole paranormal realm, I was using it basically to chase around the stuff. I was like, okay, wherever we go, we might have a better chance of seeing something. And it seems when you're with another very open or mystical person, things are more likely to happen, because that's what was happening down in Naples. Like, so me and this girl, we were led to a baseball field with this app, and we saw an orange orb, and we just like laid down in the grass and watched it hover over us. But then, it disappeared, and we just like walked to the exact point that the app was leading us to, and there's nothing really there. But we were like, oh, we were supposed to see the orange orb. So, anyways, we go back to the car, And when we get in the car, the orange orb comes back and it's flying over the car. And I swear to God, it transforms into a black helicopter and zooms over us. And we're just like shaking, like we were terrified. And I actually called Chris Bledsoe to say, like, hey, dude, I swear that I just saw a UFO turn into a helicopter. And he's like, oh, yeah, they do that. It's normal. He's like, he's like, it just means it was only meant for you guys to see. And I was like, okay, well, it makes me feel a little bit better, I guess. But we were really trying to push it. So we did one more random point. Like, for people that don't know, this app just takes you to quantum random locations. Like, it uses a quantum random number generator to send you to truly random coordinates. And so anyways, we go to our next point, which is in the water somewhere. And we have to like climb this fence behind a hotel. And we're on the beach and she just runs over to the water because there's this blue orb there this time. And she runs over to the water, trying to get close to this thing. And I'm just standing there staring at it. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And she's like, Nick, are you not freaking out right now? I was like, dude, I don't know. Like, I've just seen too many fucking weird things at this point. And, I'm just sitting there because I don't really know what to believe. I don't have my glasses on. So I'm like, I'm trying to be rational. I'm like, this could be a boat or like, anything. But, as a really pretty color blue, like it was pretty crazy. And, I'm just standing there. And Chris had told me, if you ever want like confirmation about, I don't do this anymore, obviously. Like, I was just seeking every which way to find the truth back then. But Chris had told me, like, if you ever need confirmation about something you're seeing, ask the lady. I mean, so the alien that he claims he was abducted by is named the lady. So he's like, ask the lady for confirmation. So I like asked the lady. I was like, hey, people with no context are gonna think I sound like a freaking nutcase. But anyways, I just had to give you one good high strangeness story. And so I asked the lady for confirmation. I swear to God, I look to my right and I see another blue light, this time on, like above the sand, like on the beach. It's not in the water, and it's just blinking and blinking and blinking. And I'm trying to be rational again. I'm like, is that like a bike, with the headlight on it bumping up and down? Is that some of the flashlight turning it on and off? I can't really figure it out. But then I look to my left and there's a dude with black slacks, black shoes, black suit, a fedora, your typical men in black, walking down the beach towards this light. And I'm like, okay, I don't know if this is like a security guard for this hotel or whatever, but that girl, she's in the water running around screaming, and he doesn't even bat an eye at us. So like, if we're trespassing, he's not doing a very good job. Or like, my other crazy thought was, maybe this is a guy, this is like 3 a.m. I was like, maybe this guy just, got home from a funeral and he just wants to walk on the beach or something. I don't know. But dude, it just fell off. And I was like, I told the girl, I was like, dude, we gotta go. And I'll leave the next story for that. But I recently saw, I'm pretty sure, another Men in Black while leaving a concert the other day, which is really weird and disturbing. And that's when I was like, dude, I gotta stop. I gotta be more careful. So
Wow.
like, every time I get like, I'll get tugged back into this stuff. And if I'm not walking righteously or praying enough or getting close to God, like, things get weird.
Oh yeah. And I think that's part of it. I've got a contact. He's been on the show. He has a great documentary series called Dark Holler. And I was in contact with him when a lot of things were falling into place with this podcast and different things we were working on. And I told him, I said, it's like these things just keep happening and they're there for us before we're ever even ready to step into it, and I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know that all the time that it's a really good thing, because it's sending me down some research rabbit holes that I'm not really comfortable in there. And not only am I not comfortable, but things are happening, like, weird things.
I mean, like I said, I think conspiracy culture has been purposely put in front of us because it's a distraction from God. It puts our minds in dark places. It's literally a clever way to drag you into the underworld of the internet and initiate you into the forbidden knowledge. And yeah, once you're initiated, you start having all those mystical things happen. Synchronicity. I don't think synchronicities the majority of the time it's not from God, it's not divine. It's mostly sending you on weird Easter egg hunts, just around in circles, doing nothing.
Yeah.
Not saving your not saving your soul.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like these entities, whatever you want to call them, I feel like they want you to become obsessed.
Yeah.
That way they can show themselves. They can just leave you these little hints, these little breadcrumbs to draw you closer and closer and closer until, well, like just take Hellier, for instance, until you're in a cave doing a ritual trying to summon Pan.
Yeah, dude. I don't think they ever set out with the intention of summoning Pan right before the pandemic. But like, dude, they did. Yeah, dude, they did something.
I've never even thought about that.
They did something, bro.
The pandemic. I've never even. That's never. Oh my god, that just blew my mind.
Everyone was watching that right before it happened, dude. I'm not saying they're bad people or they did anything wrong, but I think these things, they need us to do their magical workings, and they prod us along and puppeteer us through really cool coincidences.
Yeah, it's so crazy. It's so crazy.
For every reaction, there's an opposite reaction, right? I mean, it's dynamic law.
Yeah. Well,
Exactly.
Hill folk, I think the moral of the story here, I think Nick summed it up extremely well when he said, if it's confusing, if it's bringing you fear, anxiety, depression, chaos,
Yeah.
it's from the dark one. It's from the evil one. It's from those old gods that we shouldn't follow. But if it's bringing you joy and love and peace and compassion, then that's from God. And whatever you need to do in your life that brings those feelings to you, then that's the route you need to take. If it involves, turning the TV off, staying off the internet, taking some breaks, whatever you need to do, just make sure you're taking care of yourself, your mental health, your emotional health, your physical health, and stay away from these things that bring all this chaos. Even if it's this show, if you are binging Appalachian Intelligence and you're like, you know what? These guys, I've had too much weird for the day. My mind is racing, going crazy. I don't know what to think anymore. Hey, take a break. It's okay. Take a break, get in the word, and then come back and see us. It's all right. We don't mind. But Nick, man, it was a blast having you on here. Before we end this thing, go ahead and push all your stuff, anything that you want to push, before we jump out of here.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. I guess if people want my 2 books, which there's some stuff in there, like, I'm just, full disclosure, there's some stuff in there I don't totally agree with anymore. Like I've been saying this whole time, I was on this truth-seeking journey, and I've recently come to the conclusion that God is the truth. But yeah, I think the books still have value because they show the thought processes I was going through along the way, and throughout them, you've read them, right? I think throughout them you can see a little bit of hints here and there where I'm like, I think I believe in God. I think that's the truth.
Yeah.
But I just wasn't totally sure. But anyways, if you're interested in buying those, because the 3rd book and the 4th book are coming out very soon, and you'll kind of need those to understand what I'm about to put out. Anyways, making this too long and convoluted. But if you want those, just send me a DM on Twitter or Instagram. It's NickHinton. I do not have a website. I have a broken one. Don't go to it. Message me directly, and I'll tell you how to get the books.
That sounds great, man. That sounds great. Hill folk, buy his books up. I know that. Go check out all his Twitter threads. That'll just be some little teasers for you to get your brain pumping, the juices flowing, and then buy these books. Jump in them, dive in them.
Legendary Twitter threads, I would add.
The best.
Thank you.
The best ever. But the best that ever do it. I mean, this is like Twitter thread celebrity. Okay. Y'all don't even know. jump on there, check out all of his work, dive into the wide, weird world of Nick Hinton. And then whenever you hear this interview, you'll think like me. This is a story of victory.
Yeah.
Nick,
And
man.
I hope this was spooky enough for you.
Oh, dude, there's nothing spookier than super intelligence taking over the world, led by fallen angels and watcher tech that are leading us into the actual end times spoken about in Revelation of the Bible, to where things are going to get really terrible, really scary for everybody walking on earth, when locusts that sting like scorpions are flying through the air and harming people, but we can't kill them, when people will look around and wish for death, but death will not find them. It don't get scary, isn't it?
Sounds pretty
Yeah,
spooky.
you just scared the hell out of me there.
But no, man, it was definitely spooky enough. It was this is a really, really good one. We appreciate you coming on here, man. We'll definitely have to do this again. I just enjoy spending time talking with you. I enjoy all the vast banks of knowledge that you have, no matter what we dive into and start talking about. And I think you're a lot like me. I think you got a little case of ADD that I just it matches. So we're good to go there.
Yeah, no, I had fun, man. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for being on. Lance, I love you, bro.
Boys, Levians made it out there.
Hill folk, thank you guys for tuning in again. And until next time, we'll see y'all later.